Our group will be presenting nervous habits during public speaking. Our group members are Kelsey Carpenter, Letty Andrade, and Whitney McCorkle.
Some things we will be covering during our presentation are a literature review, the purpose of the study, the methods of the study, the results of the study, our inter-observer agreement, treatment integrity, limitations, and finally, conclusions.
Our first study was titled Effect Labeling Enhances Exposure Effectiveness for Public Speaking Anxiety. Behavioral treatments for anxiety disorders have proven to be highly effective in reducing symptoms of anxiety, but unfortunately, many patients do not respond fully. Previous studies found that patients sometimes do not improve, drop out of treatment, or relapse. The following article set out to investigate whether effect labeling enhance exposure effectiveness in participants with public speaking anxiety. This mixed design study used 100 participants. 50 of the participants were placed in an exposure combined effect labeling group, and the other 50 in an exposure control group. Time 1 consisted of assessment time points at baseline. Time 2 was exposure, and time 3 was a 1-week follow-up. The results demonstrated that participants assigned to effect labeling showed more reduction in physiological activation than control participants. No effect was found for self-report measures. Greater emotion regulation deficits at baseline predicted more benefit in physiological arousal from exposure. Combined with effective label than exposure alone. The article concluded that effect labeling enhanced the effectiveness of exposure on measures of physiological arousal, and particularly for participants who used more anxiety-related labels during exposure. They also found that participants with deficit in incidental emotion regulation benefited more from exposure plus effect labeling than from exposure alone on measures of physiological arousal. Our second article was titled The Effectiveness of 3D Video Virtual Reality for the Treatment of Fear of Public Speaking. Virtual reality has previously been utilized in research in conjunction with cognitive behavioral therapy to decrease symptoms for people with specific phobias or anxiety disorders. The following study set out to investigate the effectiveness of presenting a 3D video of virtual audience to participants who experienced the fear of public speaking. 150 participants were recruited from a psychology class pool from the University of New Brunswick. Each participant completed a personal report of confidence as a speaker, which consisted of 30 statements that were rated as true or false about their experience with public speaking. Participants with a score greater than 21 out of 30 were then invited to continue with the experimental portion of the research. 20 of the participants volunteered for the experiment and were randomly assigned to either a waitlist group or a virtual reality group. Of the 10 participants for the waitlist group, 6 completed the experiment and 4 dropped out. Participants were then exposed to a virtual audience through the use of shutter glasses and a 32-inch TV. Participants were asked to stand behind a podium in front of the television wearing the shutter glasses for about 8.5 minutes. For the first 2 minutes, the virtual audience talked among themselves, disregarding the speaker. After 2 minutes, the virtual audience began paying attention to the speaker, and the participants were instructed to read a children's book titled Green Eggs and Ham for about a 2-minute period. Scan conductance and heart rate were recorded before exposure to the virtual audience, and at the end of the session, scan conductance was monitored using a bioderm scan conductance meter. For sessions 2 and 3, the scenario consisted of a small group of people sitting in a classroom setting. The group talked among each other and after approximately 2 minutes, turned towards the camera as if waiting for the lecture to start. During the reading of the text, members of the group coughed, rustled paper, and eventually a new member joined the group. The new member also left the group by standing up and walking off camera. The group watched the speaker as if the lecture was actually occurring. The results indicated that there was a main effect for skin conductance measurements, pre-measurement versus post-treatment. Skin conductance increased after performing the virtual reality public speaking test. There was no main effect of session on skin conductance measurements. The results showed that there was a main effect for heart rate pre-treatment versus post-treatment. Heart rate increased after exposure to the virtual audience. There was no main effect for session on heart rate measurements. The results indicated that the presentation of virtual reality audience using 3D video and polarized shutter glasses does produce a physiological fear response in participants. The increase in physiological measures suggested that the exposure to a virtual audience utilizing a less sophisticated system can produce a sensation of being in front of an audience. Low-cost and user-friendly equipment may be employed in conjunction with CBT to increase anxiety for people with fear of public speaking. The third article, Fear of Public Speaking, Perception of College Students and Correlates. The aim of this study was to determine the prevalence of fear of speaking among college students and to assess its association with socio-demographic variables and those related to voice and oral communication. The participants consisted of 1,135 undergraduates between the ages of 17 and 58 years. The assessment instruments used were a questionnaire addressing sex, age, field of undergraduate study, and frequency of exposure to public speaking, and the self-statement steering public speaking scale, which included variables implicated in specific domains of public speaking. A descriptive analysis was also formed of the variables and uni and multivariate logistic regressions to examine the association with fear of public speaking. As a result, 63.9% of the college students reported fear of public speaking. 89.3% of the students would like their undergraduate program to include classes to improve public speaking. Females had a more infrequent participation as speakers in groups, and perceiving their voice as high-pitched or too soft increased the odds of exhibiting fear of public speaking compared with those students without those features. The study then concluded that many undergraduates report fear of public speaking. This fear is more prevalent among women, students who participate in few activities involving speaking to groups of people, and those who have a self-perception of their voice as high-pitched or too soft. Article 4, Model-Based Learning Protects Against Forming Habits. The study describes behaviors as being goal-directed at times or planned and purposeful. They set out to investigate how habits and goal-directed control arise. They also sought out to reveal the trial-by-trial dynamics of instrumental learning that would promote and protect against developing habits to 90 of the participants. On each trial, participants were presented with a choice between two fractals, each of which commonly led to a particular second state displaying another fractal. The second state fractals were termed coin boxes, as each had some probability between 25 to 75 cents. Choices uncharacteristically led to the alternative second state, Purely model-free learner would make choices irrespective of the transition structure of the task and would only show sensitivity to whether or not the last action had been recorded. To assess whether model-based or model-free learning strategies were associated with the formation of devaluation in sensitive habits, reward devaluation were tested as well as reward transition and devaluation interactions. During the two-stage decision task, participants showed evidence of both model-free learning and model-based learning between reward and transition. The article concluded that individual differences in model-based learning predicted the participants' subsequent sensitivity to evaluation. Therefore, they found that an association mechanism underlies as a bias towards habit formation in healthy individuals. Article 5, the effect of a single session attention modification program on response to public speaking challenge in socially anxious individuals. In the following article, researchers examine how an attention modification program would be effective in reducing anxiety response and improving performance on a public speaking challenge. There were 94 participants, each participant creating an impromptu speech. Participants were rated on their speech by judges who were blind to the condition. The judges were asked to look for quality of speech, hypothesizing if the attention modification program was effective in reducing anxiety than those in the attention control condition group. Results demonstrated that the most commonly selected topic in both groups for impromptu speeches was abortion, leading with a 49% in the AMP group and 51% in the ACC group, followed by seatbelts and nuclear power. Overall, attention training was effective in reducing attention bias to treat, as well as anxiety response to social challenge. The simple effects of time revealed that both the AMP group and ACC group showed differences in anxiety across the 3 time points. Our study was using awareness training to decrease nervous habits during public speaking. The purpose of our study evaluated the effectiveness of awareness training alone for the reduction of 3 nervous habits in public speaking. The 3 nervous habits included filled pauses, tongue clicks, and inappropriate use of the word like.
The methods of the study are what we are going to talk about next. Participants in the study were at their own homes speaking to their audience through a video chat platform, and the video chat platform we used was Google Hangouts. The participants included 3 female graduate students from Ball State University. These participants were Letty, who was 28 years old, Whitney, who was 24, and Kelsey, who was 25. The materials that were computers with webcams, a red blank sheet of paper, a white blank sheet of paper, note cards, a timer, a principal investigator referred to as a PI, a motivation questionnaire, a post-AT assessment, a research assistant, and questionnaires. The behavior. The target behaviors were nervous habits during public speaking, such as filled pauses, tongue clicks, and likes. Filled pauses included any occurrence of a speech, sound, or word, such as or that has no semantic meaning in a sentence.
Occurrences or filled pauses were scored upon the ending of each speech sound. Tongue clicks included when the speaker emitting a click sound with his or her tongue that could be heard from at least 3 meters away. Likes were any occurrence of the word like in speech that did not follow correct grammatical, semantic, or syntactic form. This may include the speaker saying like before describing what someone said. For example, she was like, "I need to leave," or saying like before describing an approximation of a number, size, event, feeling, or cognition. For example, "I had like 20 homework assignments." This does not include the speaker saying like to express interest, such as "I like ice cream," or similarity between two items. "I am not like her mother." During data collection, we collected each behavior as a separate behavior, but we then added them all together for graphing and analyzing purposes and graphed them as total nervous habits per minute. Was a multiple baseline design across participants, and there's an example to your right. Each participant in the baseline phase, as well as post-awareness training phase. Google Hangouts on video chat was what we used. The frequency data was collected through 15-second intervals. Data collectors were the 2 group members that were not giving the speech. We assigned each person as a principal investigator and a research assistant to watch the speaker give the speech. Each behavior had an independent data collection, but the main focus was the total number of behaviors per minute. During these, we started with the participants entering a video chat. Video chat was the participant chose a topic from 2 personal and familiar choices. So each choice was something that they could talk about and was familiar to each of the participants. The participants were given 10 minutes to take notes, and the principal instructor would set the timer. Off, or when the speaker was ready, the participant delivered a 3 to 5 minute speech. Or the principal investigator set a timer for 5 minutes, and the principal investigator collected the behavior data on the target behaviors. The principal investigator held up a white sheet when there was 1 minute left on the timer, and then the principal investigator would hold up a red sheet when 5 minutes were completely up. At this time, the speech was completed and data collection was finished for baseline. During the treatment phase, the treatment was awareness training. So response description was added. The principal investigator told the participant their behaviors, the operational definitions of their behaviors, and the topography of the behaviors. Then the participant would view a video of baseline speech of themselves making the speech. During this viewing, the principal investigator would identify the occurrences of target behaviors, and this was referred to as response detection in the original study. Then the participant chose another topic to prepare a speech on. The preparation for the speech reflected the baseline preparation. They would then begin the speech, and during the speech, the participant would raise her right hand when she displayed the target behavior. For the first 5 behaviors, the principal investigator would also raise their hand. After the first 5 behaviors, the principal investigator only raised their hand if a participant did not raise their hand during the presentation of the target behavior. The participant delivered a speech on the same topic until 100% of occurrences were signaled by themselves in 1 speech or 90% in 2 speeches. If no progress over 3 speeches, the awareness training was to be terminated. The treatment phase continued. After, we did a post-awareness training assessment, which mirrored that of the baseline. Booster sessions also occurred. So if target behaviors did not decrease by 80% during the first assessment or after intervention, or there was an increasing trend, a booster awareness training session was completed. The booster session mirrored the intervention session. Probes are to be conducted. One generality probe per participant will be implemented as when the treatment phase ends, and the generality probe will mirror the baseline session.
Now we're going to go over the results of the replication study. In our graph, you can see we used the multiple baseline across participants design. We took data on each other, so the name indicated in the top right corner of each graph is the name of the participant, not the data collector. As you can see, myself and Whitney have the same baseline average of 4.25 with Letty's at a 3.25. The smallest range in baseline was Whitney's, which only ranged from 4 to 5 occurrences. Letty and myself had larger ranges, which were 2 to 5 and 3 to 6 respectively. I had the lowest post-treatment average, which was a 1.8. Whitney and Letty had comparative averages of 2.75 and 2.5, which are both significantly less than their baseline averages. Whitney had the smallest post-treatment range as well, which was 2 to 4, followed by Letty's, which ranged from 1 to 4, and my post-treatment range was the largest at 0 to 4. Each of us were successful in decreasing our frequency of nervous habits during public speaking. We had comparable results to the original study, except for Letty, which is because she had a lower baseline average. The habit reversal, which was our intervention, was proven again to be an efficient way of decreasing nervous habits during public speaking. During our baseline, the most common habit was filled pauses, which is something like an or an with 26 occurrences between all 3 of us participants. The least common habit was tongue clicks. This is very similar to the original study. Due to presenting to each other and not an audience, the participants did not feel an increase in confidence or decrease in anxiety when in future public speaking situations. Due to not decreasing by 80% or having an increase in trend, we also had to do booster sessions like the original participants.
IOA, Inter-Server Agreement, was also collected for 33 to 38% of the total sessions. We count IOA by taking the smaller number of total occurrences and divided by the larger number of total occurrences and then multiply by 100 to get a percentage. We use the primary investigator and the research assistant to collect IOA on each session. So in Kelsey, we had session 5, 6, 10, and 12 to collect IOA data. And in 3 of the sessions, you see we had 100%. And on session 6, we had 83% IOA. And Letty's, she had 6, 8, and 9. We had 100% in 8 and 9 and 85% on session 6. For mine, we had session 5, 6, 10, and 12 with 100% and 5, 10, and 12 and 85% on session 6. Session 6 for all 3 of us had a lower IOA. That was also one of our sessions where we had some technical difficulties, which we will talk about later in our limitations. We contribute our IOA differences to possibly be from technical difficulties with the microphone or the video freezing. So some may have caught an occurrence of a behavior that another person did not hear. Overall, the IOA were all above 80%, most of them at 100%. Treatment integrity. To maintain integrity of having an audience that we were not comfortable with, we only spoke over text when we were not doing speeches. We tried to control for not being able to have a broader audience. Treatment fidelity throughout all phases was calculated in 30% of sessions. Research assistants collected data on whether each of the implementation steps were met. Correct steps divided by total steps equaled treatment fidelity, which was 100%. The limitations were keeping integrity, which was communicating with the group without becoming too comfortable and being face-to-face. The time frame was the time consuming. It was too time consuming to prepare and present all the sentences as well as watch this with the primary investigator. The audience, there was an original study that presented with an in-person audience, but our audience was the technology was not always reliable. Occasionally, the microphone or video would freeze. This would alter our integrity as well as our IOA discussed before. The target behavior, one of the target behaviors, which was conflict, were hardly if ever presented in our participants. And the participant schedules, finding time for people to meet for extended periods of time could be hard.
In conclusion, we used a multiple baseline across participants design to decrease the frequency of nervous habits during public speaking. We were successful with our intervention, including our boosters, despite facing several limitations. Each participant made significant progress post-treatment. And while it was a challenge to complete our project with only 3 group members, we feel we were effective in completing our replication of the original study. Thank you.